Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Today we're going to do another episode of the Memory Lane series, the place where we take a look back at some interesting articles and interviews from old guitar magazines. My dad has been subscribed to Guitar World magazine for about 30 years now. He saved a bunch of old magazines. He was kind enough to let me borrow some, so the one we're going to look at this time is the September 1999 issue of Guitar World magazine. Here's the cover. I'm going to share a list with you guys of their top 40 metal albums of the 80s, comprised of their top 20 hair metal albums, top 10 shred albums, and top 10 real metal albums. Then at the end, I'll share with you my personal favorite album from each category. Here we go. Why don't we start off with the top 20 hair metal albums by Tom Beezer. First up, Motley Crue, Too Fast for Love. The album that launched 1,000 bands. Fueled by drugs, alcohol, and Vince Neil's impossibly shrill wail, Motley Crue unwittingly established the look, sound, and attitude of a decade with this rough and tumble album recorded in just a week. Permeated by a genuine punk sneer and an obvious devotion to such 70s power pop luminaries as Cheap Trick and the Raspberries, Too Fast for Love's Take No Prisoners Abandoned still sounds fresh today, while Tommy Lee's I've Got a Cowbell and I'm Gonna Use It drumming may be the best example of hard rock stickmanship committed to tape since John Bonham laid it down on Led Zeppelin. Next up, Def Leppard Pyromania. The album that formulated and proved the hair band theorem, pretty boys plus loud guitars equals mega bucks. With mad scientist producer Mutt Lange behind the board, Def Leppard made the transition from new wave of British heavy metal lightweights to pop metal heavyweights with flying colors and more overdubs than you can shake your Union Jack at. The unforgettable intro riff to the classic Photograph spawned 1,000 low-rent imitations, and the German count-in to Rock of Ages would yield another hit 15 years after the fact, when the Offspring sampled it for their ubiquitous Pretty Fly for a White Guy. Next, Van Halen, 1984. To all but the mentally defective, this is the last real Van Halen album, and it serves as a fittingly spectacular epitaph for the band that subsequently ceased to exist at all but in name. With their blonde lead singer, hotshot guitar player, and chick-obsessed pop songs, the group had effectively created the template for a generation of big-haired rockers. It's an association that King Edward would forever try to play down, but to deny that Hot for Teacher and the often overlooked Drop Dead Legs didn't serve as the inspiration for 10 years worth of inferior knockoffs is simply disingenuous. Next, Rat, Out of the Cellar. If the metal world learned one lesson from Rat's Out of the Cellar, it was this: a kickin' attitude and headbanging classics like Round and Round and lack of communication will triumph over shortcomings like gruesome looks and a poor lead singer any day. Truly the good, the bad, and the ugly. Next, Kix, Midnight Dynamite. Even those who consider the hair metal era to have had all the redeeming characteristics of, say, a Nuclear Winter are quick to give the Kix their props. Was it their self-deprecating sense of humor, their AC/DC meets Def Leppard riffs, the fact that manic mouthpiece Steve Whiteman often sounded like he was recovering from a severe head cold? Well, whatever it was that actually made these perennial underdogs cool was in full effect during the writing and recording of Midnight Dynamite. This record should have been as big as Pyromania, and the fact that Cold Shower, a pioneering rock/rap fusion with Balls of Steel, wasn't as big as Ice Ice Baby is a brutal injustice that can never be redressed. Next, David Lee Roth, Eat 'Em and Smile. With Top Gun Steve Vai and Billy Shannon backing him, David Lee Roth proved that he and not Eddie was the keeper of Van Halen's. Excuse me while I skip ahead. Fun-loving spiritual flame, combining shred and slapstick with an ease and grace that the overly earnest and lumbering Sammy Hagar fronted Van Halen could never hope to achieve. Eat 'Em and Smile has all the elements of a great Van Halen album. And while some will point to passion and warfare as the fleet-fingered Vi's moment of glory, I think that he was a whole lot more fun to listen to when Diamond Dave's off-the-cuff attitude prevented him from disappearing too far up his virtuistic. Next, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. Had Bruce Springsteen been a big-haired pretty boy, it's safe to say that this is the album that he would have made instead of Born in the USA. Well, the boss still hasn't made his glam album, but his New Jersey neighbor John Bon Jovi did his best to fill the void. The fact that this record, with its guy-next-door narratives, mammoth choruses, and whammy-happy guitars, courtesy of current Heather Locklear, main squeeze Richie Sambora, totally, completely, and irrevocably blurred the line between candy, pop, and hard rock and sold 1 billion records in the process, still has many of us confused as to what kind of band Bon Jovi actually was. Nevertheless, Living on a Prayer, You Give Love a Bad Name, and the uber power ballad, Wanted Dead or Alive, are bona fide rock classics. Next, Cinderella, Night Songs. Given his gruff falsetto howl, it's no surprise that Cinderella frontman Tom Kiefer eventually managed to blow out his voice, but on Night Songs, the band's debut, the singer's pipes were just as strong as his songwriting and guitar chops. And even though the album cover depicts the band sporting some of the most hideous day-glow spandex duds imaginable, Kiefer's bluesy instincts managed to imbue songs like Somebody Save Me, Shake Me, and Nobody's Fool with a righteous authenticity that so many bands of the Aquanet Army so sorely lacked. Next, Poison, Look What the Cat Dragged In. First of all, anyone who dares to claim that his first reaction to the jacket cover of Poison's debut wasn't, "Whoa, these chicks are hot," is a lying sack of. Second of all, even though he blew off Guitar World's repeated interview requests for this Metal Meltdown issue, C.C. DeVille was the funniest, coolest, and most reckless player to ever sell out an arena. Third of all, if Talk Dirty to Me, gotta skip ahead again. Talk amongst yourselves. Had never been recorded by the Sex Pistols for Never Mind the Bollocks, snotty rock critics everywhere would be hailing it as the greatest punk rock song of all time. Next, Tesla, Mechanical Resonance. While their comfortable jeans and t-shirt get-ups made Tesla the regular Joes of the hair metal era, Mechanical Renaissance, the group's electrifying debut, was anything but average. Guitarist Tommy Schiach and Frank Hannon were a formidable duo who graduated with honors from the Thin Lizzy School of Dueling Guitars, and vocalist Jeff Keith sounded like he had stolen the gravel right from Rod Stewart's driveway. Tesla produced a series of high-quality albums, but this, the band's debut, displays a combination of spontaneity and attention to detail that sets it above the rest of the band's output. Next, Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. The massive do sported by Axl Rose in the Welcome to the Jungle video certainly justifies this landmark album's inclusion on any hair metal best-of list. That said, it's vital to note that Appetite, with its magic combination of angry Stones-on-steroid riffs, unbridled attitude, and punk rock nihilism, may also be one of the top 20 best rock records of all time. So good, in fact, that Guns N' Roses had no choice but to self-destruct in order to avoid the daunting task of topping it. Next up, Faster Pussycat, Faster Pussycat. It's a shame that Faster Pussycat felt compelled to evolve after releasing this rough-and-tumble collection of 3-chord gems. If they had stayed their simple course, they might now be regarded as LA's snotty answer to the New York Dolls. True to Johnny Thunder's Rock Now, Ask Questions Later approach, it's highly unlikely that guitarist Greg Steele or Brent Muscat bothered to tune up even once during the tracking of this disc, while vocalist Tane Down painstakingly emulated Dolls vocalist David Johansen's total disregard for pitch. Perhaps most importantly, Down also shared Johansen's uncanny flair for injecting wit and wordplay into otherwise totally lowbrow lyrics. Next, Whitesnake, Whitesnake. Hardcore fans of ex-Deep Purple vocalist David Coverdale's more stripped-down, bluesy, and obscure incarnations of the Snake may have found this album reeking abominably of sellout, but those of us first introduced to the band via this highly polished collection of Zepp-inspired riffage couldn't help but be blown away by its almost barrack majesty. Guitarist John Sykes' wicked vibrato and Jack the Ripper technique never falter and sound infinitely more ballsy than the limp tone and uninspired pyrotechnics that Steve Vai would lend to the band's following releases. The epic Still of the Night is the best song that Led Zeppelin never wrote, and it's no wonder that Jimmy Page later enlisted the manly Coverdale for a short-lived but utterly slamming collaboration in 1993. Next up, White Lion, Pride. No one will debate the fact that English-impaired Nordic beefcake vocalist Mike Tramp was the Fabio of hair metal, or that former Anthrax drummer Greg D'Angelo was the scariest-looking poodle-haired ever to hit rocks big time. Or to be totally honest, that Vito Bratta, the Staten Island-born guitar wonderkind with the buggy eyes and Farrah Fawcett wings, never once looked comfortable in a band photograph. Nevertheless, White Lion was one totally ferocious beast of a band, and Bratta, for all his mysterious malice, was hands down the most tasteful, lyrical, and inventive guitarist of his generation, adding structure, style, and an unerring pop sensibility to Van Halen's oft-tapped fountain of inspiration. All of White Lion's albums were strong efforts, but with such ditties as Don't Give Up, Wait, and All Join Our Hands, this is the record that the band should definitely have been most proud of. Next, Warrant, Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinking Rich. Yes, Warrant may have taken the oversexed himbo act to new and odious extremes in their horny live shows, and the guitar duo of Eric Turner and Joey Allen was certainly nothing to write home about, but Warrant's few shortcomings should never be allowed to eclipse the simple truth that vocalist/band leader Janie Lane was one of the most accomplished songwriters of the pop metal genre. If you can't get down with anthems like the rousing Big Talk, the classic Down Boys, and the disturbingly moving ballad Sometimes She Cries, seek medical attention immediately. Your heart is stopped. Next, Winger. Endless vilification on Beavis and Butthead has ensured that the Winger name can never be fully rehabilitated. Nevertheless, it would be cruel but not unusual to deny songs like 17, Madeline, and Headed for a Heartbreak their due. Propelled by the fusion-owned chops of drummer Rod Morgenstein and guitarist Reb Beach's file-like fluidity, Winger were actually in it for the music as well as the money, and the group never failed to throw at least one flawlessly executed prog rock stunt into their otherwise slick pop ditties. All that said, the totally deplorable cover of Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze that soils this disc also makes you feel like Kip and the boys got what they deserved. Hold that thought, I gotta skip ahead again. Wish they could have put all these albums back to back. Okay, Extreme. Aerosmith they weren't, but Extreme's flawless musicianship, spot-on backing vocals, and white boy funk grooves, plus guitarist Nuno Betancourt's total domination of his instrument, ensure that this hard-working quartet would forever be remembered as Boston's second-best hard rock band. There's nary a clunker on the group's 1989 debut, and the mildly rebellious Mother Don't Want to Go to School Today succeeds admirably in ripping off Van Halen's Spanish Fly, Eruption, and Unchained in one fell swoop. Next, Skid Row. While they started out as meek protégés of Don John Bon Jovi, Jersey's godfather of metal, this album, propelled by the righteous Youth Gone Wild and the Guns Don't Kill People, screwed up teens with guns kill people ballad 18 in Life, would quickly prove that Skid Row didn't need to ride on anybody's coattails for long. Vocalist Sebastian Bach quickly established that his good looks and the almost offensive power of his bulletproof voice were only two of his three most important attributes, the third, of course, being his uncanny and totally sociopathic ability to get into of trouble. Others may disagree, but in my book, Skid Row were the real rock and roll deal. Down and dirty working class kids with the gift of riff. Next, The Cult, Sonic Temple. Were they a goth band, a new wave quartet, an AC/DC tribute outfit? All of the above, actually. After shape-shifting more times than that weird-looking alien on Deep Space Nine, The Cult finally settled into a lusciously produced hard rock groove that suited Ian Astbury's I Am the Lizard King on steroids voice and Billy Duffy's bag of admirably well-recycled Jimmy Page licks to a perfect tee. Produced impeccably by Bob Rock, the King Midas of metal, Sonic Temple was one of the last great hair metal records, or perhaps the first real neo-metal album. Thanks to the recent rise of cock rock revitalists like Buck Cherry and Loudmouth, Temple tracks like Firewoman, Sweet Soul Sister, and New York City sound uncannily awkward 10 years after their release. Last, Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood. While Kurt Cobain was sitting in his bedroom plotting the demise of all things hair, Motley Crue were hard at work recording what would prove to be their magnum opus. With the infallible Bob Rock kicking their collective into maximum overdrive, the group reached new heights. The greatly underrated Mick Mars dished out sizzling guitar tones and ultra-tasty solos. Vince Neil found his inner voice, and bassist/songwriter Nicky Sixx perfected his already rock-solid riff writing. Dr. Feelgood, Kickstart My Heart, and Don't Go Away, Mad, Just Go Away, and She Goes Down are as good as pop metal ever got, and the album's undeniable quality was reflected in its blockbuster sales. Say what you will, but Motley Crue made sure that the 80s went down in a blaze of glory. Now let's take a look at the top 10 shred albums of the 80s by Mordechai Clyde Mocker. Starting off with Van Halen, Fair Warning. Van Halen's last truly great hard rock record finds King Ed in tip-top form. From the thunderous tone to the furious blues licks from Eddie Van Halen delivers a tappin', slammin', whammy bar pullin', string bendin', feedback wailin' performance, woo! That's simply scorching. Once again, he reminds us why he's the head shred. Next, Alan Holdsworth, IOU. Alan Holdsworth, IOU. Joe Satriani may be surfing with the alien, but guitarist Alan Holdsworth, with his odd blend of horn-like legato, exotic harmonies and scales, and totally out-lead lines, shows us that he may just be the alien. Backed by the hot rhythm section of bassist Paul Carmichael and drummer Gary Husband, Alan Holdsworth not only shreds, but serves up one of the warmest, most intimate, and most human performances of his very long career. Next up, Yngwie Malmsteen, Rising Force. If you can get past the fact that the title sounds like a low-budget porno film, it's obvious that some monstrously awesome guitar playing here. The high priest of neoclassical guitar, Yngwie introduces Hendrix to Paganini and lays down some of the fastest guitar playing ever heard by a rock dude. 15 years later, guitar players are still trying to master his sweep arpeggios and still arguing if he sucks or not. Go figure. Next, Steve Vai, Flexible. Fun with the whammy bars, weird green aliens, and lots of cool studio tricks, making his guitar speak in ways we never imagined. Big Steve Vai milks his whammy bar for all it's worth and demonstrates that he's both the resident mad genius and sly prankster of the shred scene. Next, Megadeth. Peace sells, but who's buying? The Dickie Betts and Dwayne Allman of metal guitar, Dave Mustaine and Chris Poland demonstrate that they're the ultimate shred guitar tag team. Between Poland's grace and Mustaine's growl, these fellows have all the corners covered on this one. Next, Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien. Joe shows us you can play both fast and pretty, and still please a heck of a lot of people. His Alien album, recently reissued by Epic, sold a cool million and taught us that when it comes to ripping guitar, catchy songs are what really matters. And this album had plenty of them. Sleek and powerful, this is surf music for the space age. Next, Ozzy Osbourne, Tribute. Fusing the power sensibility of metal with techniques and harmonic structures borrowed from classical guitar, Randy Rhoads, along with Yngwie, co-wrote the book on neoclassical shred guitar. His greatness as a performer and as a musician was never clearly demonstrated as on this posthumous live album, dedicated to Rhoads' memory. He had the licks and the speed, and he delivered them here with the sort of joy, intensity, and warmth that would make both Sigavoe and Hendrix proud. Next, Tony Malkopine, Maximum Security. Shrapnel Ultimus Tony Malkopine takes Yngwie's neoclassical thing and really goes to town. Malkopine's compositions are majestic rock symphonies, jam-packed with some of the hottest alternate-picked, harmonically sophisticated lines this side of Stockholm. In Doken's George Lynch joins Mr. Malkopine on a couple of tunes for a shred fest that will leave your speakers smoldering. Next, Watchtower, Control and Resistance. Sounding like the twisted scion of Metallica and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, Watchtower was the most brilliant weird band of its time. Guitarist Ron Scharzabonk, with his complex harmony solos, strange scales, and furious staccato lead bursts, performs tricks on his guitar that will leave you more than sufficiently breathless. Last, Testament, Practice What You Preach. With their fast and chunky riffs and scorched earth solos, Testament's Alex Skolanek and Eric Peterson show the world what true thrash and burn guitar terror is all about. Combining the sophistication of a progressive guy with the ferocity of a metal guy, Skolnick's guitar weeps, wails, sings, roars, and rocks. Let's move on to our last category, the top 10 real metal albums by Jeff Kitts. I'd like to point out that none of the albums on this list are named after their creator. So, starting off with Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. When Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne parted company in 1979, fans wondered which would prosper more. Blizzard was Ozzy's decisive answer. Brilliantly crafted songs like Crazy Train and the infamous Suicide Solution were elevated to the level of art by Randy Rhoads' classically influenced and technically astonishing solos. Randy's sound and melodicism made him an instant hero, a status magnified thanks to his untimely death and the passage of time. Next, Motorhead, Ace of Spades. It might well be argued that Motorhead are the godfathers of heavy metal, pushing distorted guitar chords and battering ram bass beyond thresholds of mere pain into a style that is uniquely theirs. It took years, though, before anyone figured out that this was music. From Metallica to Black Flag, Ace of Spades is universally cited as a major developmental influence, family tree shared by punk and metal. Denim, leather, and warts, Motorhead are as ugly as the music itself. Next, Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. The final word to anyone who thought Black Sabbath were washed up after Ozzy split, Tony Iommi proved himself to be the true Iron Man of metal. He rarely sounded or played better. Next, Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast. There's no denying the raw, awesome power of Iron Maiden's first two releases, Iron Maiden and Killers, but it was The Number of the Beast that served as the true musical beginning of Maiden's metal mastery. Throughout the 80s, new singer Bruce Dickinson and his substantial vocal range gave the band greater depth, enabling primary songwriter and bassist Steve Harris to explore more progressive metal territories as guitarists Dave Murray and Adrian Smith traded fiery licks like they were cutting heads. Songs like The Prisoner, Invaders, and the Devilish title track made it okay to sing about sci-fi fantasies and Satan, topics that would later become central to heavy metal. Next, Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. Clad in studded leather and boasting unbridled metallic power, as defining as the Harleys they rode, Judas Priest were the very definition of metal in the early 80s. Though its successor, Defenders of the Faith, runs a close second, Screaming for Vengeance is generally considered Priest's finest hour. The twin axe attack of Glenn Tipton and K.K. Downing, plus Rob Halford's glass-shattering wail over songs like Electric Eye, Bloodstone, and the blistering title track, gave Priest a distinct sound all their own. Next, Scorpions, Blackout. The Scorpions' breakthrough success, if only because of the chart-topping power ballad No One Like You, but Blackout had more than a big mushy single to its credit, as songs like Can't Live Without You, Now, and the blistering title track proved that the Scorps could party rock with the best of them, and that Rudolf Schechner and Matthias Jabs were a formidable metal guitar tandem. Next, Dio, Holy Diver. When Ronnie James Dio struck out on his own after a brief stint fronting Black Sabbath, many thought he'd never be able to recapture the brilliance he achieved with Sabbath on Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. They were wrong. Holy Diver packed all the metallic force of his previous efforts with an added dash of commercial accessibility. Rainbow in the Dark, that carried the pint-sized Dragon Slayer to new levels of stardom in the early 80s. A young and cocky pre-Def Leppard Vivian Campbell shines throughout this holy masterwork of traditional fire and brimstone metal. Next, Anthrax, Spreading the Disease. When singer Joey Belladonna took over for the Out's Neil Turbin, Anthrax became one of the first thrash bands to combine clean, Metallica-inspired speed metal with Iron Maiden-style opera metal vocals. Spreading the Disease packed enough mosh pit firepower, air, aftershock, to reel in fans of the considerably harder Slayer and Metallica, while still offering enough goofball attitude and sing-along choruses, Madhouse, to give girls a thrash band they weren't afraid of. Next, Metallica, Master of Puppets. Hetfield, Hammett, and company pull off the impossible, blending crafty, complex arrangements with lofty social commentary without compromising any of the band's inherent metallic crunch. Last, Slayer, Rain and Blood. The quintessential thrash metal album, with 29 minutes of blinding speed, buzzsaw riffing, and murderous vocals, Rain and Blood became the standard by which all other thrash albums were measured and tossed aside. Honestly, I haven't listened to all 40 albums on these lists front to back, so I don't feel completely qualified to give you my favorite from each category, but I'm going to do it anyway. With that being said, I believe that each and every album on this list deserved to be there. I think all of them were influential in their own way. With that out of the way, my favorite album from the hair metal list is Whitesnake, Whitesnake. My favorite album from the shred list is Megadeth, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? Finally, my favorite album from the real metal list is Motorhead, Ace of Spades. It was a tough battle, though. I wouldn't say that any of the albums on the list are leaps and bounds better than the others. So, please leave your list of your favorite album from each category down in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think. So that does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.